Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the realities of not having proper Brexit controls, as two food stores in Norwich are found guilty of selling mislabelled meat. It's not that this practice is only possible because of Brexit, of course, but our government's particular form of Brexit has made the problem more serious, as I'll explain. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So let's begin with this latest case. Two shops in the Midlands had some of their meat inspected, and it was not what was claimed. The article on the case highlights the importance of food traceability. Absolutely vital for public health that if food is found to be contaminated, carrying diseases, it can be traced back through the supply chains, cut it off and prevent more people being affected. Now, the problem if illegal mislabelling of food is not, it's not especially a Brexit problem, of course. People will remember the horse meat lasagna scandal, which occurred while we were in the EU. It was discovered as a result of routine inspections, just like this case. And people will say, well, this latest case was picked up as a result of routine inspections, so where's the Brexit link? Well, there are two ways in which Brexit has made us more vulnerable to this. The first is our lack of import controls. Now, I've mentioned in the past that in 2022, the authorities carried out an experimental check of 22 lorries carrying food into Britain over a 24-hour period, and 21 of them were carrying illegally unfit for consumption food, which was intended to be sold to the British public as food. It even included like raw meats not separated from cakes and crisps. It's an absolute nightmare. And there was stuff rotting, like putrefying. It was a mess of standards failures. And it was picked up on that day because the authorities carried out some checks because they wanted to see how bad the situation was. Remember, we are still not even now carrying out standards checks. So every other day that these goods coming into the country, this has been happening for years now, not being checked. Now, part of the reason we're not carrying out these checks is because we physically can't. We don't have the staff, we don't have the facilities, and we don't really have the room to build the facilities. So our plan is to build just enough of a system to make it look like we have checks. It's sort of like in one of those old Western movies where you go down the little street and really it's just cardboard houses or wooden fronts of houses. There's nothing behind them. So we're going to have just enough checks to make it look like we're doing checks. And they're not due to come online until later this year either. But mostly the problem is that the Tories don't actually care about import controls. Consider that a very influential wing of the Conservative Party does not believe in import controls at all, like fundamentally. They're free market capitalists who would like nothing more than for all border infrastructure across the entire world to be removed. I know they make a fuss of people coming into the country, but that's a deception. Their obsession with small state means they want no checks at all. They don't worry about contracting a nasty disease themselves because they will pay top dollar for the best quality food. And this impacts the thinking as well. Once you accept the notion that you can't actually maintain decent import controls, that it doesn't take long before you tell yourself that maybe import controls aren't necessary at all. And then you extrapolate that line of thinking into believing that maybe even internal market checks are not all that necessary. Especially when there's a cost of living crisis and food shortages. Why not just turn a blind eye? After all, more robust checks would mean the cheaper diseased food not entering your market. Oh, and that will mean food inflation will go up and the shortages will be more noticeable. And the second problem that Brexit has created is that of load. As part of the EU, people will say, oh, well, these checks didn't take place in the EU, so why does it matter now? They did take place. The checks were shared around the EEA. It's just that the checks were not loaded at the border between Britain and other countries in the EU because there was no trade border there. It was happening elsewhere. We were all part of one market and we all shared the responsibility of monitoring and enforcing the standards of that market. Now we're on our own. We have to manage all of our own inspections and compliance. And when you factor in all the extra Brexit red tape on top, we just don't have the capacity. We're now having to carry out a less efficient inspection regime with fewer resources. There's only two ways to deal with this. We either rejoin that large single market or we have to just massively scale back our choice of goods. We have to shrink down the level of imports to the point where we can cope, which will mean having way less choice, way less food, way less everything. You know, this case of the food shops in Norwich being caught is a reminder that we need inspections. On this occasion, the inspections worked. But how many cases of illegally mislabelled food are in the country which are going unnoticed because we cannot manage our own standards regime, presided over by a government that doesn't even want to bother? Because think back in just one 24-hour period, when they did a check a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, I think it was, 21 out of 22 lorries were carrying illegally unfit for consumption food. Where was all that food going? Into British food shops and markets. Consider that on every other day since we left the single market, those lorries were getting through no bother. Think about how much unfit for consumption food has made it across our borders and to food shops around the country and has never been caught. We hear of a couple being caught in Norwich, but given the scale of the problem, it should be such a big problem that it's major national news. We should be hearing of prosecutions all the time. We should be seeing an absolute epidemic of these cases because we know it's all coming into the country. What we're not seeing is the evidence of it being caught. We've had a couple of cases where it's been caught. And that is because the inspection system we now have in this country cannot cope with this massively increased demand. They don't have the resources to cope with what was a normal pre-Brexit level of checks, but now with the added problem that nobody else in Europe is checking on our behalf. You know, this story is not a story of two food shops who got caught. It's the story of how almost none of this dangerous and illegal activity is being countered. Our hard Brexit makes it impossible. The Tories are not even attempting to do what they can. It is, after all, a problem which will hit ordinary struggling households, not Tory millionaires. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.